Hey everyone, and welcome back. I am so excited for today's deep dive because we are going to be talking about roads and bridges and a future where they might just have their own digital twins.
Yeah, you got it.
And this is all thanks to something called BIM.
BIM, that's right.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar with this term, BIM stands for Building Information Modeling.
Exactly.
So to kind of set the stage for today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at a really interesting roadmap that was put out by the Federal Highway Administration.
Okay.
And this roadmap lays out a 10-year plan for nationwide BIM adoption, and it's packed with all sorts of insights.
For sure.
So one of the first things that jumps out when you start reading this roadmap is that the U.S. is actually kind of lagging behind when it comes to BIM for infrastructure.
Yeah, that's right. We're definitely behind the curve compared to some other countries.
And the roadmap highlights a major problem that we're facing right now, and it even gives it a name.
Okay.
Information silos.
Information silos, yeah.
So what does that mean? Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Joe, think of it this way. Like, imagine you're building a skyscraper.
Okay.
And you've got all these different teams working on the project. You know, you've got the architects, you've got the structural engineers, you've got the electricians, the plumbers.
Right. Lots of moving pieces.
Exactly. Now, imagine if each of those teams was working from a different set of blueprints.
Oh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It would be chaos. You'd have walls that don't line up, pipes that don't connect, wires going everywhere.
And probably a lot of frustrated people.
Definitely a lot of rework, delays, and it would cost a fortune to fix all those mistakes. Well, that's kind of the situation we have right now with our roads and bridges.
So instead of everyone working from the same set of plans, we've got different departments, different agencies, maybe even different companies, all using their own data, their own systems.
Exactly, and that's what the roadmap refers to as information silos. Everyone's working in their own little bubble, and they're not really talking to each other.
Okay, so that's the problem. Now, how does BIM come in to save the day? What's the solution?
Well, BIM aims to create a single source of truth, which would be a detailed 3D model, a digital twin of the infrastructure
Okay.
containing everything, information on the materials, the maintenance history, and even real-time performance data from sensors.
Wow, so it's not just a 3D model, it's like a living, breathing digital replica of the actual thing.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about having all that information in one place, accessible to everyone who needs it.
And this isn't just for the engineers and the designers, right? I mean, how does this impact someone like me, just someone who is trying to get from point A to point B without hitting a pothole?
Well, for starters, BIM can help reduce those frustrating cost overruns that we often see with infrastructure projects. The roadmap actually cites a study that found a 25% return on investment with BIM implementation.
Okay, so less wasted money, which could potentially mean more resources for things like fixing those potholes.
Exactly.
And we're talking.
Mm.
But can BIM actually prevent potholes?
Well, maybe not prevent them entirely, but it can help.
Okay.
BIM enables us to do proactive maintenance. So instead of waiting for something to break, we can use those digital twins to identify potential problems before they even happen.
I see. So it's like having a checkup for your roads and bridges.
Exactly. Imagine knowing the exact condition of a bridge down to the last bolt before a crack even appears.
So we're talking about safer, more reliable infrastructure because we're catching those issues early on.
That's the goal.
That's pretty reassuring.
Right.
But the roadmap acknowledges that most states are still in the early stages of BIM adoption.
Yes, that's right.
So where are we on this journey to a BIM-powered future?
Most states are at level 0 or 1 on a 4-level maturity model. So
Level 0 or 1. So we've got a lot of room for growth.
yeah, we're just starting out, basically.
Okay, so they're maybe dipping their toes in the water, experimenting with 3D models, but not quite ready to fully commit.
Right. They might be using BIM for certain parts of a project, like in the design phase, but they're not yet using it across the entire life cycle.
Okay, so what are the first steps? What does the roadmap recommend for those early stages?
The roadmap really emphasizes the importance of those first 2 years, laying the groundwork for success.
Okay, so like building a strong foundation before you start building the house.
That's a great analogy. It calls for creating a national BIM task force to provide guidance and leadership,
Okay.
developing training programs to cultivate a BIM-savvy workforce.
Right, so we need people who actually know how to use this stuff.
Exactly.
And it also talks about setting clear criteria for selecting contractors.
Yes, making sure that the people building our infrastructure actually have BIM experience.
So we need the right people, the right skills, and the right partners in place
That's right.
before we can really start to see the benefits of BIM.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the overall goal of BIM,
Right.
this idea of creating a single source of truth, a digital twin for all our infrastructure.
Right.
But BIM isn't just one big blob of technology, is it? What are the different pieces that make up this BIM ecosystem?
The roadmap breaks it down into 4 key elements: policies and processes, people and skills, data and standards, and tools and technologies.
Okay, 4 key elements. So let's unpack those a bit, starting with policies and processes.
Okay, good place to start.
What are some of the challenges that states are facing when it comes to putting the right policies and processes in place for BIM?
One of the biggest challenges is the lack of a unified approach to data management.
Okay.
A lot of state DOTs have different departments, different divisions, and they all have their own ways of doing things.
So it's like those information silos we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
but even within a single organization,
Right.
different departments might not even be speaking the same language.
Exactly. You can't function effectively that way. It's like trying to run a company where every department uses a different accounting system.
Oh, I can only imagine the headaches that would cause.
It would be a nightmare.
Yeah, so breaking down those silos, not just between organizations, but within organizations, is crucial
I agree.
if we want BIM to really work its magic.
For sure.
Okay, so that's policies and processes.
Right.
What about the people and skills element? How do we make sure that we're not just training people to use the software,
Yeah, we need more than just button pushers.
but that we're actually building a workforce that truly understands BIM and can use it effectively?
It's about having that deep understanding of BIM principles, understanding the why behind it, the bigger picture.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing which buttons to press. It's about knowing why you're pressing those buttons.
Right. Unfortunately, a lot of the current training programs out there are very software specific. So you might learn how to use one particular BIM software, but then you go to a different company, they're using a different software, and you're lost.
It's like learning to drive a stick shift. And then you get in a car with an automatic transmission, and suddenly you don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Okay, so training needs to focus on those broader BIM principles, not just the specifics of one particular software.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about policies, we've talked about people.
Right.
Let's move on to data and standards.
Okay, data is the fuel that powers BIM.
Right.
But one of the challenges highlighted in the report is that state DOTs are actually juggling 3 different types of data models.
3 different types. What are they?
You've got those old paper-based blueprints, which are still used in many cases.
Okay, those dusty old rolls of paper.
Exactly. Then you've got digital files like PDFs and spreadsheets.
So we're making progress, but we're not quite there yet.
Right. And then you've got the more sophisticated object-based models, which are what BIM is all about.
So we've got these 3 different ways of representing information about our infrastructure, and they don't always talk to each other very well.
Exactly.
So it's like having different departments speaking different languages again. And the roadmap really emphasizes the need to move away from this fragmented approach and towards a more unified system where information flows seamlessly.
Exactly. And that's where open data standards come into play.
Open standards. Okay.
They're essential because they provide a common language for BIM data.
So everyone's speaking the same language, regardless of the specific software they're using.
That's the idea. It allows for better interoperability, which means different systems can talk to each other.
Okay, so that's data and standards. And finally, we have tools and technologies.
Right.
What are some of the challenges there?
Well, one of the things that the roadmap highlights is that state DOTs have invested a lot in technology over the years.
Right, they're not starting from scratch.
Exactly. The problem is that a lot of those systems are kind of scattered.
Okay.
They were implemented at different times for different purposes, and they don't always work well together.
So it's like having a toolbox full of specialized tools, but no way to actually connect them or use them together effectively.
Yeah, another great analogy.
So we need to move towards a more integrated approach,
Definitely.
using those open standards to make sure that data can flow seamlessly between systems.
Exactly. We need to break down those technology silos, just like we need to break down the information silos.
Right, so we have a pretty clear picture now of the current state of BIM in the U.S.
I think so.
Lots of potential, but also some major hurdles to overcome in terms of those 4 elements that you talked about. The policies, the skills, the data, and the technology.
Right. A lot of work to do.
But let's shift gears for a bit and talk about why this matters.
Okay, sure.
What are the actual benefits?
The benefits? Oh, they're huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they impact everything from project costs to the way we manage our assets. So BIM leads to significant cost savings. And the roadmap actually cites several studies that demonstrate this.
Okay, give me an example.
So one study found that BIM implementation reduced construction cost overruns by up to 10%.
10%. That's a lot of money when we're talking about these massive infrastructure projects.
It is.
And remember that example we talked about earlier, the one with the mismatched blueprints?
Oh, yeah.
BIM helps to avoid those kinds of costly mistakes and rework, things that often stem from poor communication and coordination.
Exactly.
So less wasted time and resources, which means projects are more likely to be delivered on time and within budget.
Right.
Okay, so that's cost savings. What other benefits can we expect to see?
BIM also leads to better project outcomes overall. It allows for better visualization and analysis during the design phase, which leads to better decision-making.
Okay, so instead of just looking at 2D drawings, engineers can actually virtually walk through the 3D model of the project
Yeah, exactly.
and see how all the pieces fit together and potentially identify problems before they become real-world headaches.
That's right. And BIM tools also allow you to run all sorts of simulations and analyses, so you can essentially test out different design options and optimize the performance of a structure.
I see, so it's like a virtual test lab for infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You can simulate how a bridge will respond to different loads, different wind conditions.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. And it also, it seems like it would facilitate better collaboration between the different design disciplines.
Oh, absolutely. Architects, structural engineers, MEP engineers, they can all work together more effectively because they're all looking at the same model.
So they're all on the same page, literally.
Exactly. And that leads to fewer conflicts, fewer errors, and a smoother design process overall.
Okay, so we've got a more efficient design process, better outcomes.
Right.
What about the construction phase? How does BIM actually play out on the ground when they're, building the bridge or the road?
One of the biggest advantages during construction is the improved coordination and communication between the designers and the contractors.
Okay.
Traditionally, there's often a lot of back and forth, a lot of misunderstandings, which leads to change orders, delays, and cost overruns.
Because everyone's working from different sets of drawings or different versions of the plans.
Exactly. But with BIM, everyone's working from the same model, so there's much less room for misinterpretation.
Okay, fewer misunderstandings, fewer change orders.
Right.
And hopefully a smoother process overall.
Exactly.
Okay, and BIM can also be used to create those really detailed construction schedules, right?
Yes, and even simulations. So you can kind of rehearse the construction process in the virtual world.
Okay, so you can identify potential bottlenecks or problems.
Right, exactly.
And maybe find ways to work around them or avoid them altogether.
That's the idea. And BIM can also be used to track progress, manage materials, and ensure quality control throughout the construction process.
So it's about bringing data and transparency to the job site.
Yes.
Which ultimately leads to more efficient and cost-effective operations.
That's the goal.
Okay, then we've got design, we've got construction, and now we move on to the final stage.
Right.
Operations and maintenance.
Right.
And I feel like this is where those digital twins really come into their own.
Oh, absolutely.
What are some of the benefits of using BIM for operations and maintenance?
Well, for one thing, BIM allows DOTs to create this comprehensive digital record of each asset, like a bridge or a highway, so they have all the information they need to manage and maintain that asset throughout its entire life.
Okay, so instead of relying on, paper records or outdated databases.
Right, exactly.
Maintenance crews can access the asset's digital twin, complete with its history, its design specs, any past inspection reports, and even real-time data coming from sensors.
Yes, it's all there in one place.
Imagine a bridge inspector out in the field with a tablet.
Right.
They can pull up the bridge's digital twin
Right there on their tablet.
and see everything they need to know about that bridge.
Right. They can see where the critical components are located, review past inspection reports, even access real-time data from sensors embedded in the structure.
It's like having X-ray vision for infrastructure.
It is. It's incredible.
And it's not just about inspections.
No, it's much more than that.
Right. You can use BIM to plan and schedule maintenance activities. Yes. Track the performance of assets over time.
Definitely.
And even simulate the impact of different maintenance scenarios.
That's right. You could use the digital twin to see how a bridge would respond to a major earthquake or a flood.
And then you can plan your maintenance activities accordingly.
Exactly. It allows you to make more informed, data-driven decisions about how to manage and maintain your infrastructure.
Okay, so leading to safer, more resilient,
Right.
and more cost-effective operations over the long term.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sold. I think I'm officially a BIM enthusiast now.
Welcome to the club.
But as we've discussed, there are definitely some bumps in the road, some challenges, and even risks associated with BIM implementation.
Oh, for sure.
Let's dig into those a little bit.
Okay.
What are some of the things that could go wrong, and how can we mitigate those risks?
Well, one of the biggest risks is setting unrealistic expectations. BIM is a powerful tool,
Okay.
but it's not a magic bullet.
Right. It's not going to solve all of our problems overnight.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
takes time, effort, and a willingness to change the way we do things.
Okay, so managing expectations is key. Over-promising and under-delivering could lead to people getting disillusioned with BIM.
Right. And then they're less likely to support it in the future.
Makes sense. What else should we be cautious about?
Another potential pitfall is a lack of standardization. We've talked about the importance of open standards, but if different organizations are using different approaches to BIM or interpreting those standards in different ways, it could lead to chaos and incompatibility down the road.
So it's like trying to build a house with bricks that are all different shapes and sizes.
That's a good analogy. It's just not going to work.
Okay, so we need to make sure that everyone's on the same page
We do.
when it comes to BIM standards.
We need a unified national approach.
Right.
With clear guidelines that everyone can follow.
Okay, so standardization is crucial.
Right.
Anything else we should be aware of?
Well, there's always the risk of project delays and cost overruns.
Okay, but I thought BIM was supposed to help prevent those things.
It can.
Okay.
But there's a learning curve as teams get up to speed with the new tools and processes.
Right, there's going to be a transition period
Exactly.
as people learn how to use BIM effectively.
So it's important to factor that into the planning process. Be realistic about the timeline.
Okay.
Have some contingency plans in place in case things don't go exactly according to plan.
So plan for the bumps in the road.
That's right. And be patient.
Okay.
The benefits of BIM will become more apparent over time as teams gain experience and as the technology matures.
Okay, so patience is a virtue when it comes to BIM implementation.
What is?
Any other risks that we should be thinking about?
One more that I think is important to highlight is the risk of BIM implementation being driven by the technology itself rather than by the needs of the organization.
Ah, so it's like getting caught up in the shiny new object syndrome.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Getting so excited about the technology that we forget to ask ourselves, do we actually need this? Or will this actually help us achieve our goals?
Right. It's crucial to start with a clear understanding of what you're trying to achieve,
Okay.
what your goals are, what your challenges are, and then you can choose the BIM tools and processes that will actually address those needs.
So it's about using technology as a tool,
Yes.
not letting the technology dictate what we do.
Right.
Okay, I think that's a really important point.
It is.
So we've talked about some of the potential risks, but before we move on,
Okay.
I want to touch on one more thing.
All right.
The cultural shift that's needed to really make this BIM vision a reality.
Oh, yeah, this is huge.
Changing the way people work, the way they think about infrastructure, that's not easy.
It's not. It's a big challenge.
So what needs to happen? How do we actually make this shift?
Well, first of all, you need strong leadership.
Okay, so we need leaders who believe in BIM.
Yeah, leaders who are willing to champion it, advocate for it.
Right, and who can inspire others to get on board.
Exactly.
But it's not just about leadership.
Right.
You also need a clear communication strategy.
Definitely. People need to understand what BIM is, why it's important, and how it will benefit them.
So it's about educating people, addressing their concerns, and really getting them excited about this new way of doing things.
And it takes time. You can't just flip a switch and expect everyone to embrace BIM overnight.
Right, it's a process.
It's a journey. And you need to be patient and persistent.
Okay, so we need strong leadership, clear communication, and a healthy dose of patience.
Definitely. Those are the key ingredients for successful cultural change.
Okay, so we've got the ingredients, we've got the recipe, but now we actually need to start cooking.
We do.
We need to put all of this into action.
That's right.
So what are the next steps?
Well, the roadmap lays out a pretty detailed plan
Okay.
for how to move forward with BIM implementation over the next 10 years.
10 years, that's ambitious.
It is, but I think it's achievable if we have the right people and the right resources in place.
All right, so what does that 10-year plan look like? What are the key milestones?
Well, the first 2 years are all about laying the groundwork that we've been talking about,
Okay, the foundation.
creating that national BIM task force,
Right.
developing training programs, setting those selection criteria for contractors.
Okay, so making sure we have the right people and processes in place.
Exactly. Then, in years 3 through 5,
Okay.
the focus shifts to implementation.
Okay, so we're actually starting to use BIM on real projects.
Right. The roadmap recommends launching a series of pilot projects.
Okay, pilot projects, so kind of like test runs for BIM.
Exactly.
Seeing how it works in the real world before we go all in.
Right. And these pilot projects will be crucial for gathering data, identifying best practices, and really demonstrating the value of BIM to skeptics.
So it's about building that momentum, that excitement for BIM.
Exactly.
Showing people that it actually works. Okay, so years 3 through 5, we're piloting BIM.
Right.
And then what happens?
Then, in years 6 through 10, the focus is on scaling up.
Okay, so taking what we've learned from those pilot projects and applying it more broadly.
Exactly. The goal is to have BIM fully integrated into all aspects of infrastructure development and management by the end of year 10.
Wow, so that's a pretty ambitious goal.
It is.
But it sounds like we've got a roadmap to get us there.
We do.
Now, as we've been talking, I've been thinking about the impact of BIM on another crucial aspect of infrastructure, and that's safety.
Right.
You know, safety is obviously paramount when we're talking about roads, bridges, tunnels, all of that.
Of course.
So how can BIM help us create safer infrastructure?
Well, in a lot of ways.
Okay.
First of all, during the design phase, you can use BIM to identify potential safety hazards,
Yeah.
like blind spots, tight clearances, areas with a lot of pedestrian traffic.
So you can actually design those hazards out of the project before construction even begins.
Exactly. And you can even use BIM to create virtual safety training simulations.
What does that mean?
So imagine a construction worker could put on a VR headset and practice working at heights or operating heavy machinery in a virtual environment.
Okay, so it's like a flight simulator for construction workers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That way, they can learn how to identify hazards and respond to emergencies without putting themselves at risk in the real world.
I love that idea. So that's during the design phase. What about during the actual construction process itself?
Well, BIM can be used to track the location of workers and equipment in real time,
Okay.
which can help to prevent accidents, like someone backing up a truck and not realizing there's a worker behind them.
Right, or someone wandering into a restricted area.
Exactly. And if there is an accident, BIM can help emergency responders locate the injured workers more quickly.
Wow, so it's almost like having an air traffic control system for the construction site.
Right.
Okay, so BIM can make the construction process safer. What about the operational phase? How does BIM contribute to safety once the asset is built and in use?
Well, as we discussed earlier, BIM enables proactive maintenance,
Right.
which is essential for preventing accidents.
Okay, because if you know a bridge is starting to deteriorate, you can fix it before it collapses.
Exactly. And BIM can also be used to create digital evacuation plans and emergency response protocols.
I see. So if there's an accident or a natural disaster, you can use BIM to simulate different scenarios and figure out the best way to get people to safety.
That's right. It allows you to be much more prepared and to respond more effectively in an emergency.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So BIM is not just about building safer infrastructure. It's about managing and operating that infrastructure in a way that prioritizes safety from start to finish. And as the technology continues to evolve, I can only imagine that we'll see even more innovative applications of BIM for safety. Leveraging things like AI, machine learning, and all that sensor data to really create a truly intelligent and responsive infrastructure.
That's what we're working towards.
It's an exciting vision for sure,
Yeah.
but it also raises some questions about the human side of things, What happens if we become too reliant on these digital systems? What happens to human expertise in a BIM-dominated world?
You're right.
These are important questions that we need to be thinking about as we move forward,
We do.
because ultimately we're building infrastructure for people,
Yes.
and we need to make sure that BIM is used in a way that benefits everyone, not just the engineers and the contractors.
Absolutely. And the roadmap actually addresses this. It talks about the importance of community engagement throughout the BIM implementation process.
Okay, so it's not just about building a digital twin of a bridge.
Right.
It's about building consensus and making sure that the bridge we build is actually something that the community wants and needs.
Exactly. And that involves things like holding public meetings, creating online platforms for feedback.
Okay, so giving people a chance to weigh in on the design.
Right. And even using virtual reality
Oh, wow.
to allow people to experience a proposed project before it's built.
So they can actually walk through a virtual model of the bridge and see how it will impact their neighborhood.
Exactly. It's about making BIM accessible and understandable to everyone, not just the technical experts.
I think that's so important.
It is.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about the technology itself. It's about what that technology enables us to do.
Yes.
It's about creating infrastructure that serves the needs of the community, improves our quality of life, and helps us build a more sustainable and equitable future for everyone.
I think that's a great way to sum it up.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive so far.
We have.
We've explored the current state of BIM in the U.S., the potential benefits, the challenges, the risks, and even this cultural shift that's needed to really make this vision a reality.
It's been quite a journey.
But the story doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
Give us a glimpse into the future of BIM. What's coming next?
Well, one of the most exciting trends is the integration of BIM with other cutting-edge technologies,
Okay, like what?
like AI, machine learning, and the Internet of Things.
So we're talking about sensors embedded in our roads and bridges, constantly collecting data, and then using AI to analyze that data.
Yes.
And maybe even predict what's going to happen in the future.
Exactly.
So it's not just modeling the infrastructure, it's creating a living, breathing digital twin that's constantly learning and adapting.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay, that's mind-blowing. What else? What other exciting things can we look forward to in the future of BIM?
Another fascinating area is the growing focus on sustainability and resilience.
Okay.
So using BIM to create infrastructure that's not only efficient and durable, but also environmentally responsible and adaptable to climate change.
So things like modeling the carbon footprint of different infrastructure options or simulating the impact of extreme weather events.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it allows us to make more informed decisions about the environmental impact of our infrastructure investments, which is so important as we face the challenges of climate change.
Okay, so we've got self-aware infrastructure.
Right.
We've got eco-conscious design. What else? What other exciting possibilities are in store for the future of BIM?
Well, I think we're also going to see a shift toward more open and collaborative data management.
Okay.
So instead of having these proprietary systems that lock data away in silos, we're going to see a move towards open standards that allow for seamless data sharing.
I see. So making that data accessible to more people.
Right, and that could lead to the creation of these vast interconnected networks of BIM data, where we can all learn from each other's experiences and collaborate on a global scale.
Imagine DOTs being able to access a global database of BIM models, drawing on the collective experience and knowledge of engineers and contractors from all over the world.
Exactly.
That's a pretty powerful idea.
It is.
So this is a journey, and it sounds like we're still in the early stages.
We are.
But the potential is huge.
It is.
And it's exciting to see these trends starting to emerge.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating time to be involved in this field.
But, as we talk about all these amazing possibilities, it also makes me wonder if we run the risk of getting so caught up in the technology that we lose sight of the human side of things. Expert speaker.
Yeah, it definitely does give us a much deeper understanding.
It's really fascinating to think about all the possibilities.
It is.
Okay, so they're collecting all this data from all these different sources.
Right.
But then what? How do we manage it? And we're talking about huge amounts of information here.
Yeah, data management is a crucial part of BIM implementation.
Okay, so what are some of the key things to think about when it comes to BIM data management?
Well, first of all, you need a secure and reliable platform for storing all that data.
Okay, so like a digital warehouse for all that BIM data.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And that could be a cloud-based solution.
Right.
Or an on-premise server or some kind of hybrid approach.
Yeah, it depends on the needs of the organization.
Okay, so we've got the data stored, but it's not just about storing it.
Right.
It's also about making sure it's organized and accessible.
Exactly. You need a system to organize and index the data so people can actually find what they need when they need it.
Okay, so that could involve things like...
Creating a standardized file naming system.
Okay.
Using metadata to tag files with relevant information.
So you can search for things more easily?
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe even implementing a more sophisticated search engine.
Especially when you're dealing with massive amounts of data.
Right, because you don't want to be like digging through file folders for hours trying to find that one specific piece of information.
No, you don't.
It's like having a library for all your BIM data.
I like that analogy.
You need a good cataloging system so you don't get lost among the stacks.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay, so we've got the data stored, we've got it organized.
Right.
What else do we need to think about when it comes to data management?
Well, data governance is another important aspect.
Data governance, okay.
Things like who has access to the data,
Okay.
what they can do with it.
Right, so making sure that people aren't like changing the data or deleting it accidentally.
Or intentionally.
Yeah, or intentionally.
And how to ensure the data's integrity and accuracy.
So data governance is kind of like the rule book for how we handle BIM data.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Okay, so we've got the data stored, organized, and we've got some rules in place to make sure it's being handled properly.
Right.
But how do we make sure it's actually being used effectively?
That's where data analytics comes in.
Data analytics, okay.
It's about taking all that data that we're collecting and turning it into actionable insights.
So it's not just about having the data. It's about understanding what it means and how we can use it to make things better.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example of how that might work in practice?
Sure. Imagine a transportation agency is trying to reduce traffic congestion in a big city.
Okay.
They could use BIM data along with real-time traffic data from sensors and GPS devices to create a simulation of the city's entire transportation network.
Okay, so it's like creating a virtual traffic jam.
In a way, yeah.
But in the computer, so you don't have to actually cause a real traffic jam.
Exactly.
And then you can run different scenarios.
Yeah, like what would happen if we changed the timing of the traffic signals?
Okay.
Or what if we added a new lane to this highway?
Or what if we implemented congestion pricing?
Right, exactly.
And you can see how each of those scenarios would impact traffic flow without actually having to disrupt people's lives in the real world.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
And data analytics can also be used to optimize maintenance schedules, pinpoint potential safety hazards.
So we're not just reacting to problems after they happen.
No, we're being proactive.
We're trying to anticipate them and prevent them from happening in the first place.
Exactly.
And we can even use data analytics to predict how well infrastructure assets will perform in the future.
That's right.
Wow, so it's like having a crystal ball for infrastructure management.
In a way, yeah.
Okay, so all of this is really exciting.
It is.
But as we're talking about data, we also need to talk about the other side of the coin, which is privacy and security.
Right, that's a crucial consideration.
We're collecting a lot of information about our infrastructure and even about the people using that infrastructure.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that data is being used ethically and responsibly?
Well, first of all, we need to be transparent about what data is being collected, why it's being collected.
Right, so no more secret data collection.
No.
We need to be upfront with the public about what we're doing and why.
Exactly. And we need to give people control over their data.
Okay, what does that mean?
Allowing them to opt out of data collection or
sorry.
to access and correct their information.
So putting the control back into the hands of the people.
Exactly.
I like that. What else?
We also need to implement strong security measures to protect the data from unauthorized access, use, or disclosure.
Okay, so things like encryption, firewalls, access controls.
All the things that we hear about when we talk about cybersecurity.
Right, but it's not just about protecting the data from hackers, right?
Right.
It's also about protecting it from misuse or abuse by the organizations that collect it.
That's a really important point.
So making sure that data is only used for its intended purpose.
Exactly.
And that it doesn't violate people's privacy or their rights.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a big responsibility.
It is.
But it's one that we can't ignore.
No, we can't.
The potential benefits of BIM are huge.
Huge.
But we need to make sure that those benefits are shared by everyone and that BIM is used ethically, equitably, and sustainably.
I couldn't agree more.
So this roadmap from the Federal Highway Administration,
Yeah.
it's a step in the right direction.
It is.
It's really exciting to see things starting to move forward.
It is.
But what else can we look forward to in the future of BIM?
Well, one trend that's gaining a lot of attention is the integration of BIM with technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the Internet of Things.
We touched on that a little bit earlier, but can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure.
What are some of the ways that those technologies are going to change the game for BIM?
Well, imagine sensors embedded in our infrastructure, constantly collecting data on everything. Traffic flow, structural strain, even weather conditions.
Okay.
And all that data is fed into a BIM model, which uses AI and machine learning to analyze the data, find patterns, and even predict what might happen in the future.
Okay, so it's not just modeling the infrastructure. It's actually creating a living, breathing digital twin.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's constantly learning and adapting.
Exactly.
So, for example, if there's a bridge and it has sensors that can detect, changes in temperature, wind speed, all that kind of stuff,
Right.
the bridge can actually talk to the computer
In a way, yeah.
and say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit stressed out right now because the wind is really strong.
Right.
And then the computer can say, okay, well, maybe we should lower the speed limit on the bridge.
Exactly.
Or maybe we should even close the bridge temporarily until the wind dies down.
Right.
That's incredible.
It
It's
is.
like our infrastructure is becoming self-aware.
It is, in a way.
What other exciting things can we look forward to in the future of BIM?
Well, another trend that's gaining a lot of traction is the use of virtual and augmented reality
Oh yeah, VR and AR.
for BIM visualization and collaboration.
So instead of just looking at a 3D model on a computer screen, you can actually put on a headset and step inside the model.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
It's a game changer for design and collaboration. Imagine a group of engineers and architects all wearing VR headsets,
Okay.
walking through a virtual model of a building, and they can discuss design changes, identify potential problems.
All in real time, and they're all seeing the same thing.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then you've got augmented reality,
Okay.
which can be used to overlay digital information onto the real world.
So you could be looking at a bridge through your tablet or your phone,
Yeah.
and you could see all sorts of information about that bridge, like its maintenance history or real-time sensor data.
Exactly. It's like having X-ray vision for infrastructure.
I love that analogy.
It's pretty cool.
What other futuristic BIM things might we see?
Well, there's also a lot of interest in using BIM for 3D printing
Oh, 3D printing. Oh.
and other advanced manufacturing techniques.
So you could potentially print like entire buildings or bridges
Yeah.
directly from a BIM model.
It's not as far off as you might think.
That sounds like science fiction.
It does, but 3D printing is already being used for building components. And as the technology matures, we could see entire structures being printed on site.
Wow, so we're not just modeling things in the computer, we're actually creating them directly from the model.
Exactly.
And what role does BIM play in all of this?
BIM is going to be essential for connecting the digital world of design with the physical world of construction.
Okay.
It's about bridging that gap to make the entire process more seamless and efficient.
It really feels like we're on the verge of a revolution
I think we are.
in the way we think about and interact with our built environment.
It's a really exciting time.
But as all these trends continue to evolve, it's important to remember that
Very good stuff.
BIM is a tool.
It is. That's right.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
Absolutely.
We need to be mindful of the potential downsides as well as the potential benefits. We need to think about things like data privacy, cybersecurity, job displacement,
Those are all important considerations.
and make sure that the benefits of BIM are available to everyone.
It's about using BIM to create a more equitable and sustainable world,
Absolutely.
not just a more efficient one.
Okay, so this has been an amazing deep dive into the world of BIM.
It has.
We've explored the challenges, the opportunities, the exciting possibilities.
It's been a pleasure talking with you about all of this.
Likewise. And for you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to learn more about BIM and the role it's playing in shaping our world.
We encourage you to keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep those digital twins spinning.
You know, it's amazing to think about how BIM is not just changing the way we build things, but also how those things actually function once they're built.
It is, yeah, it's a whole new way of thinking about infrastructure.
You know, we're moving from just constructing these static objects to creating these systems that are connected, responsive, almost like living organisms.
Right, and that has huge implications for the future of infrastructure.
So thinking about this intelligent infrastructure idea, what are some of the skills that the next generation of engineers, architects, construction professionals, what do they need to know to thrive in this new world?
It goes beyond just knowing how to use the software, the technical stuff.
Okay.
It's about having a deeper understanding of the principles behind BIM
Right.
and how to really leverage it to solve real-world problems. Like, you need people who can think critically, who can find creative solutions, who can see the big picture.
So we're talking about problem solving, critical thinking, communication, collaboration.
Exactly, all of that.
So it's a whole set of skills
It is.
that go beyond just that technical expertise.
And, we can't forget about ethics.
Okay.
We need to make sure we're equipping these future professionals with a strong ethical framework so that they're using this powerful tool.
Right, because BIM is a powerful tool.
It is.
And like any tool,
Yeah.
it can be used for good or for bad.
Absolutely. It all depends on the people who are using it.
So as BIM becomes more prevalent, we need to be having these conversations, right?
I agree.
About the implications. What are the potential downsides? What are the things we need to watch out for? What are the ethical considerations?
And we need to be getting input from a lot of different people.
Right. Not just people in the tech industry.
Not just the engineers and the architects, but also the people who will be using this infrastructure, the people who will be living near it, affected by it in any way.
It's about taking a holistic approach.
I agree.
Really thinking about the impact on everyone.
That's what it's all about.
And I think that's something that this roadmap really tries to do.
I think so too.
It's not just about the technology.
Right.
It's about using that technology to create a better world.
For everyone.
For everyone.
That's the goal.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much ground.
Yeah.
We've talked about the challenges, the opportunities,
Right.
exciting possibilities for the future.
It's a really fascinating field.
It is. And for our listener, we hope that this deep dive has been valuable for you.
I hope so.
You know, we've really just scratched the surface of what BIM can do.
We have.
But hopefully this has given you a good overview and some food for thought.
And inspired you to learn more.
Absolutely, because the world of infrastructure is changing.
It is, rapidly.
And BIM is at the forefront of that change. So if you're interested in this field, now's a great time to get involved.
Absolutely.
So until next time,
Keep
keep exploring
Keep asking questions.
and keep those digital twins spinning.